Hey guys, how's it going? It's Josh here with Buckeye Bowhunter, and today is going to be the 4th episode of my Turkey Hunting 101 series that I've been putting out every week. And we're going to dive into in-the-field scouting and talk about the actual sign and what you're looking for to help you decide how to approach hunting these turkeys in the field. Now, if you haven't watched last week's episode, I recommend that you do, because I really dove into e-scouting or electronic scouting and talking about how to use maps to put yourself in a better situation to find turkeys, and how to use maps to identify like key locations and identify areas that might hold birds, which saves you a ton of time as opposed to getting out there and having to walk across the whole countryside. You can really eliminate a whole bunch of areas and focus in. Today, I'm going to talk about, once you have found that location and you get out there, what you're going to be doing to find turkeys and to confirm that turkeys are in that location that you e-scouted. So with that said, let's get started. And I kind of want to break this video up into 2 different categories, 2 different types of in-the-field scouting. And the first one being observation. So as we all know, turkeys are a very, especially in the spring, visual and vocal animal, and you know they want to be seen by other hens. They got that big fan for a reason. They're looking for, you know, big open areas where you can see a long ways, and then they're using their calls, gobbles, yelps, the hens as well, to call and attract and let everybody else know where they're at. And that really helps you out as a hunter, especially when it comes to observation type scouting. Now, if you found a piece of property, you think there's going to be turkeys there, the first step is going to be getting in your car and taking a drive. Driving around the property that you're trying to hunt, if you can see any of it from the road, probably one of the best ways to actually locate birds. It's really unintrusive. You know, if you got really big open fields, wide open fields, or open woods, or big river bottoms that you can see down into, it's super easy to just take a drive in the mornings or the evenings when those turkeys might be out there strutting, looking for hens, and, you know, try and put your eyes on some birds. I can't tell you how many times that I've been successful by driving down the road and seeing a big strutter out in the field, stopping at that farm, knocking on his door, and, you know, killing that bird a day or 2 later. I definitely think it's something you should try first. You know, if you're headed out to that property and you're planning on diving in, you know, on foot, take a loop around. It really helps to drive around the property anyways, just to kind of get a lay of the land, check all those access locations that we identified while we were e-scouting, you know, looking for trucks, looking for boot tracks, looking for, you know, turkey sign, and looking for turkeys. Your car or your truck is definitely a tool, especially when it comes to turkey season. Make sure you use it, and it'll definitely help you in the long run. The second part of observation scouting would be listening, and listening is the big one here. If you can get out in the mornings or get out in the evenings and listen to hear, you know, turkeys gobble, we're going to talk about a ton of different sounds that turkeys make. But you're going to be way ahead of the game if you can actually locate birds by hearing gobbles. That's probably going to eliminate a lot of field scouting or boot scouting that you're going to have to do, actually. If you're hunting really small properties like I am up here in northern Ohio, where I can pretty much hear a bird, especially this time of the year when there's no leaves on the tree, from road to road, it's really easy to just take a drive before work one morning, you know, stop your car every quarter mile or something like that, get out, listen for 10 minutes. If you don't hear nothing, jump back in the car and keep going. And then when you do hear a bird, if it's in the morning or the evening, you're going to have a pretty good idea where that bird's roosting. He may not roost in the same tree every night, but he's probably going to be pretty close to that area. So listening for gobbles is probably one of the biggest things that you can do. Don't miss this part. If you don't do any of this other scouting that I'm going to talk about, make sure you get out in the mornings and at least listen for birds. Now, if you're hunting really big public land like down in southern Ohio, it definitely helps to, you know, get out of the truck and maybe take a walk up to the top of a ridge or something like that, and, you know, try and stay away from areas where you think those turkeys might be, because we don't want to bump them or spook them before turkey season starts. But get yourself to a really high elevation like we talked about in the last video, and listen for that, you know, first half hour of light. You don't have to spend the whole time there. If you don't hear anything in the first 15, 20 minutes, run back to your truck and drive to another spot and do that a couple weekends in a row before turkey season comes around. That way, hopefully, you have heard, several different birds in several different locations, and you have a couple areas to start once turkey season opens up. But as we all know, turkeys don't just gobble. There's a ton of different noises that you're going to be listening for. The big one, obviously, are hen calls. Yelps, cutting, clucks, purrs, all those type of calls. If there are hens in the area, if you hear hens squawking up on the ridge, up from the road from your truck or something like that, it's probably a safe bet that there's a tom or a gobbler somewhere nearby. Toms aren't going to gobble every day. So if you don't hear a bird gobbling, that doesn't mean that there's not a turkey there. It just may mean he was quiet that day. Some turkeys gobble a lot, just by their temperament, and some turkeys are a lot quieter. Weather has a lot to do with that, and the time of the year. Gobbles aren't just because you don't hear gobbles doesn't mean there's no birds in there and you should cross it off the list. Hens yelping is definitely going to help you out. I would definitely stick around or give it a shot if I stopped at an area and I heard a bunch of hens yelping up on a ridge. It's going to be a safe bet that there's going to be a tom somewhere around there. And the last two turkey sounds that I want to talk about that you can hear, especially when you're scouting, are a little more obscure and maybe not as loud, or you're not going to hear as often. But if you do hear them, it's going to really help you out. The one is wing beats. Now, turkeys roost in trees, so they have to fly up into those trees at night, and they have to fly down out of those trees in the morning. And turkeys are a big bird. It's like a bowling ball with wings, and they make a lot of noise. And if you've never heard turkey wing beats, it's just pretty much sounds like you would think a really big bird taking off. If you've ever heard like a pheasant or something flush, it has that sort of sound to it. Now, if it's later in the season when there's a lot of leaves on the trees, you might have a little harder time hearing these if you're not super close. But this time of year, believe it or not, that noise will carry across valleys and carry across ridges pretty well. So you could hear turkeys flying up from pretty far off. I've definitely located birds just by the sound of hearing their wing beats in the evenings flying up. And in the mornings, if you've ever turkey hunted, I'm sure you've heard birds fly out of the trees. And it can be pretty loud. You can hear them crashing sticks and branches and stuff as they're going down to land, and you hear a big thump when they land. So that can definitely help you out. And another noise that turkeys make that's kind of, I feel like, doesn't get talked about a lot, that can help you locate them, is scratching. If you got dry leaves this time of year, 7-8 turkeys scratching through an area are going to make a ton of noise. They're going to sound like a herd of buffalo. Turkeys are scratching usually when they're feeding, and you'll get a group of birds moving through an area, and what they're doing is they're scratching the leaves out of the way, looking for bugs and insects underneath the leaves and in the dirt. And if you get a whole bunch of those turkeys scratching leaves out of the way, it's going to make a ton of noise, especially if those leaves are dry. And that's something you could definitely hear from a pretty far ways off. And all these sounds that we're talking about, usually early season, the way I like to scout is early in the mornings when these birds are vocal, when these birds are flying out of the trees and, running around, squawking, yelling at each other. You're going to have a lot more opportunity to actually hear turkeys being turkeys in the morning. So definitely get out in the mornings before work, a couple times on the weekend before turkey season starts, and try and locate birds this way. I'm telling you, it works, and it's going to help you out in the long run. If you're not waiting until turkey season starts, opening day, and you have no idea where to go, sure, you can get lucky. Obviously, I've definitely killed birds like that where I haven't done any scouting prior to the season. It'll definitely put you in a much better position to ambush a bird if you do these things. So that kind of concludes the observation part of scouting that I kind of wanted to cover. If you guys have any questions about that, please put them in the comments and I'll try and clarify anything. But that brings me to actually putting boots on the ground and getting out in the field and looking for turkey sign or turkeys. So the first thing that I want to cover is just turkey tracks. Turkey tracks, you're going to find them all over the place usually, especially this time of the year while birds are kind of moving around. What you're really looking for is a lot of turkey tracks in an area. Turkey tracks, there's a pretty noticeable difference between gobblers and hen tracks. Gobbler tracks are usually, 4 or 5 inches long, where hens are probably, an inch shorter than that. So you're really going to be looking for those really big tracks that are sinking down in the mud, good places to find them are, wet areas, swamps, wet logging roads or creek crossings, stuff like that. That lets you know turkeys are in the area. Another thing to look for, obviously, are turkey droppings. And turkey droppings are pretty easy to identify. And if you find turkey droppings, you can assume that, those turkeys are probably spending a fair amount of time in that area. When you're finding tracks or you're finding droppings, you want to think like, why are these here? Is this a strut zone? Is this where they're roosting? Is this where they're feeding? All of those different things, where you find the turkey tracks is just as important as finding turkey tracks. So another really good piece of turkey sign that I like to look for are scratchings. Scratchings are pretty obvious in the woods. They're going to be areas where it looks like a group of turkeys came through and scratched away all the leaves. There's going to be a bunch of spots where the leaves are moved out of the way where they were feeding or looking for bugs. And that's going to tell you, there's a bunch of turkeys in the area. Depending on how many scratchings there are, it's going to tell you where they're feeding and that they could be close by. And then the last thing I like to look for, which is what's really going to help you, kill these gobblers, is strut zones. Strut zones, like we talked about earlier, are locations where male turkeys are going to set up in the mornings or throughout the day and strut and, wave that tail fan for the hens to see and try to attract a female. Usually these areas are going to be like, high spots where they can be seen from a long ways, field edges, ridge tops, high spots in fields, logging roads, anywhere where a bird feels like he can be seen from a long ways away by other hens. And this is kind of a harder thing to identify, but there are a lot of things that you can look for. Obviously, turkey tracks, turkey droppings, and then a thing that I've noticed before, if you got like a really dry time period and there's sandier soils or something like that, you can actually see wing drags when they puff up and they're strutted. Their wings will kind of drag in the dirt. And you can see where their wings have dragged, and that'll tell you a bird is probably strutting there too. Roosting locations. And roosting locations can be kind of tricky. Sometimes they're a little hard to find if there's not a lot of birds using them. But if you've been out in the mornings and listen, say you heard a bird gobble, and you use all that intel with what you're seeing in the field when you're actually scouting, it's gonna really help you kind of figure out exactly where those birds are roosting. Now, a lot of times you don't really have to go do this, but if you want to know where that bird's at and you want to get in there real early and set up tight to a bird in the dark, this is a really good way to do it. As we talked about in previous videos, turkeys roost in very big mature trees. Usually, and they're looking for big horizontal limbs, something that they can perch on all night long. And while they're roosted in those trees, they're obviously going to leave a few things. They're going to leave droppings, they're going to leave feathers, they're going to leave sign tracks and stuff where they've landed, scratchings maybe after they've just landed, they want to eat. There's a lot of things you can look for to help identify a specific tree as a roost tree. And like I said, they're not going to use the same ones all the time, usually, at least where I hunt, but it can definitely put you in a really good spot and put you in a location if you identify one of these trees. What I've seen in the past usually is that you'll get a really big tree, say a big poplar tree or a big sycamore tree with big horizontal limbs, and you'll find a ton of turkey droppings underneath that tree and maybe some feathers. And then a lot of times, if you're hunting in thicker areas or something, turkeys have to have a pretty clear angle to fly up to the limb that they're going to roost on. So I've actually seen certain roost trees where there are no leaves for like a 20 by 20 square where every bird that roosts in that tree takes off and lands on, because that's the clearest route or the easiest route to get up into that tree for them. When you're looking for tracks and you're looking for droppings and roost trees, is to kind of put that all together and have a really well understood overall view on what's going on in that area and how the turkeys are using it. And that's what's going to actually help you have a strategic plan when it comes to attacking these turkeys and ambushing these turkeys. Are these tracks on a ridge top? Are they out in a cut cornfield? Are they down in a river bottom? Are you finding a bunch of droppings under a big tree next to a ridge, or are they out on some logging road? Are you finding a lot more hen tracks than gobbler tracks? That's where, using electronic scouting and using boots on the ground and combining all of that intel and all of that data really helps you formulate a strategic plan for attacking these turkeys in the spring. And the last thing I want to talk about, which, I haven't really used too much in past years until like maybe the last two or 3 years when it comes to turkey hunting, and that's trail cameras. Trail cameras can help you, obviously for deer hunting, but when it comes to turkey hunting, they can help you just as much. By having a few cameras out there working and, gathering data and intel when you're at work or when you're busy with family stuff or whatever, it's going to save you a ton of time. With today's technology and cell cams and whatnot, it's really easy to have, 4 or 5 cameras on your properties and keeping track of where those birds are, and let those cameras tell you where to hunt. I definitely would recommend using cell cams or trail cameras in general to help you with your scouting this spring. But with that said, thank you guys for watching. I hope this was helpful. I hope you guys got something out of this. If you guys have any more questions about this video or any of my past videos, please put them down in the comments below and I will definitely get back to them. Any of you advanced turkey hunters out there, if I missed anything or I said anything that doesn't make sense, put that down in the comments as well. I really appreciate you guys watching, and stay tuned next week because I'm gonna have a video about turkey calling for beginners, and we're gonna kind of dive into some of the most common types of turkey calls and easy to use turkey calls and how to use those and when to use those. So that should be pretty interesting. But as always, thank you guys for watching. Really appreciate it. Hit the like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit the notification bell if you want to be notified every time I upload a new video. And as always, we will see you guys on the next one.